future, we tend to forget about our past. This is a quote from Julia Watson in The College Board Provided Stimuli, How to Build a Resilient Future Using Ancient Wisdom. Today, I will be talking about the significance of historical statues and monuments. My name is David Pan. So, my research question is, should historical monuments of Confederate figures be removed in the United States during the 21st century? My position is no. Statues should not be removed since it would create an artificial past, violate the First Amendment of free speech, and serves as a reminder for the future. So this statue depicted is General Robert E. Lee of the Confederacy, and he was an ex-US Marine who sided with the Confederacy during the Civil War. So my claim number one is that removing the historical statues would be cleansing history, and these historical statues serve as an important part of history since these are Civil War statues, and the removal of these statues erases an important aspect of our past, and these statues are a physical reminder of the important key figures, and the removal of statues would be seen as censoring and rewriting history. So, according to this graph from the Denver Post, most statues are in Texas, Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia. So, but many of these statues were created after the war to remind African Americans of their suppression within the South during the Jim Crow era. This is a statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest, a Confederate Army general who was a slave trader and an early Ku Klux Klan leader. His statue is controversial because of his white supremacist views. So, this is historian and journalist Tim Stanley from BBC, and he stated that the removal of Confederate statues are driven by the principles that are morally wrong today, then it is not possible to only stop at Confederate statues and create, in a sense, an artificial past and cleanse it. So this quote shows that although some view the statues as upholding a legacy of racism, slavery, and white supremacy as a cause to remove these statues, but there are also a distortion of history, which is just as bad as removing these statues. So this graph from CNN shows the timeline of the creation of Confederate statues. So right here there are key events such as the formation of the Ku Klux Klan, the landmark case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which established the precedent of separate but not equal, separate but equal. And right here it states that the NAACP was founded in 1909, which was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And this was the time where most statues were created, which is way after the Civil War. So the removal of Confederate statues is a violation of free speech. According to Sage Snyder, a writer for the Journal of Vanderbilt University, states that in Pleasant Grove vs. Summum, the Supreme Court confirmed that even donated and privately financed monuments on public land speak for the government. So this quote shows that the removal of statues on public lands is up to the government since it spreads the government's own message. So this photo is of Vice President of the Confederate States of America, Alexander H. Stevens, and this is a park in Georgia, and this is on government land. So if they remove statues like these, it would be violating free speech. These Confederate statues also serve as a reminder for the future. So, this quote from Britannica's Pro and Con Historical Statue Removal in the United States, it states that statues are a painful reminder of the past. However, the statues represent the country's history, and taking them down is to censor, whitewash, and potentially forget that history. So, what this quote says is like, it shows that the removal of these statues would lead to forgetting the lessons of the past, and the removal of these statues would also be considered censorship, since it would suppress the Confederate statue's reminder for the future and not to make the mistakes of a morally wrong past. So, in conclusion, the values of the present have shifted away from those of the past, and the removal of these statues would be a legal issue on public land, since it is challenging the First Amendment, as well as creating an artificial past and censoring injustice. Without such statues, history would be forgotten. Works cited, and thank you.
All right, two questions I have for you. First one, what information did you need that you weren't able to find?
So I wasn't able to find information on specific statues that I wanted to do, such as Theodore Roosevelt, because it just didn't fit in my research questions.
Okay, and then how did the conclusions and questions of others impact your research?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how did the conclusions and questions of others when you're doing your research, how did what they say impact what you were doing?
So, from the quotes of Tim Stanley and the conclusion from Sage Snyder, those two conclusions led me to believe that free speech and it would be a violation of free speech, and it would be cleansing the past if we remove these historical statues.